when you first get a new project, do you prefer to hand draw your designs, or do you do them digitally on a computer now? With the advent of technology and everything, so.
I go first.
Whoever wants to go first.
I'm very old school. I feel like I studied at NYU and came out before everybody started going to computers, and while I was still art directing, never got the skill. I'm old school pencil and renderer.
It's a good thing since you couldn't take photos of the prison. So
True.
Yeah.
I would say for the initial stages, there's nothing like pen and paper to keep up with the speed of your thoughts. As for the initial iterations, definitely napkin sketches and that sort of thing. But I move very quickly into a 3D drawing for the stuff that we do, because then we can, once we draw in 3D, we're working at such a pace where in most of the projects that I do, we can just take different views, throw some dimensions on, hand it to the shop, and actually get them building.
I don't draw very well, so I like to go on the computer and start looking at just images, and they might not even relate to what we're talking about, just like things, and I'll start just putting them all over the room, kind of like a crime scene thing with the string, and then I start to pull stuff away from that, and then I'll get somebody who knows how to draw to come in and sort of help me work out the things.
What do you think are the pros and cons of each of like hand drawing? It's like your initial inspiration. You could just do it anywhere on like a napkin, you say, and then obviously digital. There's so many benefits to that as well. Like do things that you can't draw.
Well, the advantage to digital stuff is that it's you can change it really quickly, and but there's something incredibly beautiful about, especially there's still guys around who do the plans with pencil still, and I think there's just such a beauty about that pencil on paper and measuring things, and but for the work part of it. If it's on your computer, it's really easy to change and make different or throw out.
Absolutely. I mean, eventually I pass off. I mean, what I'm talking about is just is a sense of a render. I mean, I'm using an Illustrator for the first time on the project that I'm prepping now, and it's brilliant, as you say, to pull out the elements. And I do the same thing, like just tons of imagery and rely on my team who has the skills to work in 3D and work on computers and run with that. I mean, it's for me, I just don't have that personal skill. And my rendering is still, I feel like I have to pull out the oil can when I do it and really spend some time and but once I get into that mode, then it becomes fun again. So.
I think that there's an art to both of them. CAD drawings have come so far since the beginning that there's always this sort of a stigma that CAD drawings are less artistic, but it depends who's doing them. So I think that, there's definitely merit to both, and both can be beautiful in their own way.
What do you guys do when you have designer's block? Or is that more like when you start a project, you don't have like the information you need? Like before we were talking about like getting scripts in advance and not having what you have at your disposal. And then like when you get an actual script, it's completely different from what you were planning initially.
Mostly just work on feature films, so the script is done. So I don't have that issue of waiting, or I haven't
And in this
had
case,
that.
it was done as well. For
It was, yeah,
Dannemora,
with Dannemora, it was mostly done. We had one episode that wasn't developed yet, but I've had the luxury of having all of the material there. As for block, I don't know. I'm having a block right now. I've lost the sense of. All right.
Well, I always go back to the research, back to the source material, and bounce ideas off other people. And as things iterate and you get further in the process, and you end up having to adjust things or cut things for budget reasons or whatever, usually it's for the best. It's usually the better solution is usually the simpler solution at the end of the day.
I like to, when I've run out of ideas or if I'm feeling blocked, I like to go out to the office and just ask like the kids in the office who are, just starting out, people who are, looking for a break. I like to really pull them into the process, and I'll go like, well, if you had to do, a doghouse, what would it look like? And then go like, I hope it's really good.
And then you steal their ideas, yeah.
Yeah. But it's also fun to get everybody involved, and then also people feel a lot more closer to the material when everyone's had a bit of it. And I'm all I ever want to do when I'm at work is go home. So whatever makes it go faster is usually the
Don't we all?
best idea. Yes.
Have you thought of anything yet, or no?
No,
You still have a block?
I like his idea.
Well, what was the worst designer's block you've had on any project? You've never had it. You've been perfect this whole time.
I certainly have. I think it comes down to I'm very sort of practical and it's about maybe it's the Virgo in me, but it's just I like to line things up, and it just becomes more about I just go back to the research, or I go back to the locations, or I just if it's a budgetary thing. It can be frustrating, but I mean, I'm in the middle of one right now where it's like, all right, we'll just relook at that. Maybe it's good, as you say, it's going to get better. I designed a set that I'd wondered whether it was too large, and suddenly we're making it smaller. I literally wondered whether from an aesthetic point of view, but had to get away from it, deal with 3 other things, figured I'd get back to that, and by the time I was getting back to it, it cost too much. So we're just, I've gone back in with my team, literally on a plane today and texting, and I'm getting views of like, yeah, move that wall in. Let's see about that. Move that over, and that's where, they're just doing it with a click and a drag, and we're just moving forward, and it's brilliant.
I feel like sometimes I have to get the bad designs out first. So like if I'm not liking what I'm doing, I just kind of keep going with it just because it's in my head and I can't get past it. So
You have to purge it from your system.
Yes, I have to purge it to make room for whatever the good idea is to come. But I have to get what's in my head out first.
There have been times where I've walked onto the stage and with one showrunner in particular a lot, where like the set was been dressed, lit, catering food put out in front of it, and he would walk in and go like, nope. And that's the worst. Like, you can get around not having a great idea because there's always one set on a show for me where it's just like, put all that stuff in there because I don't like, okay, that's going to be a bad set. But that kind of the hard part for me is like getting things so wrong. And there is a wrong for people, and that to me is the bad hard thing.
So what happened in that case when he was like, no?
Oh my God, how much time do you have?
Is there a short version or?
No, we just had to change it, the whole thing. And while he stood there with his hands on his hips, and we just started pulling stuff out of other rooms and throwing stuff up on the walls, and then we ended up shooting most of the room, and it was the main set of one of the best episodes of the show. So
Now everyone's going to try to figure out.
maybe he was right.
Mark, you brought up budgets, and I know you guys don't always have large budgets to work with. So what's the most creative you've been on a small budget with the set?
I can speak to this. So on a small budget, so one thing, to use it as an example from AGT Champions is, AGT has been around long enough where we've been lucky enough to have sort of a lot of things in storage. So when we're, you speak to designer's block sometimes, but sometimes it's also, we have no money for this. What do we have? So it's actually sort of like going, if it's walking into a prop house or walking into storage and looking around, just sort of to be inspired by something. How do you use something that you've used before but in a different way? How do you put it together in a different way to approach it creatively?
I will say on Trumbo, Trumbo was a very low budget movie that was period and dealt with many decades. And one of the things that I did was literally designed and built scenery in order to in a puzzle. We had to create a noir film set, the Edward G. Robinson film set for one of the scenes. And so I wanted to do a brick facade, just a simple, old New York thing with a fire escape. But I designed it in such a way that we would pull it apart in four sections and reposition it, taking the fire escape off, and it became the brick wall for the prison somewhere else. The back side of that same set we built as old scenery. So the making of Spartacus, we just went on the flip side of the noir set and we filmed the back of that set. We pulled the drop down and put up a blue sky, and we rolled in a Roman house in the background. We used the same pots that were in Trumbo's house, which was supposed to be here in the desert, turned them into props for Spartacus. It's just about, how do you turn something upside down and backwards and repaint it. And, we did that a lot on that movie.
A million years ago, I was working on a movie, and the production designer was an art director on the original Star Wars movie, and he would walk us around some of the sets and tell us how they made them. And you think about Star Wars and you think like, oh my God, they must have just had, and the walls of the Millennium Falcon were made out of turned over silverware trays, and he would just tell us all the time. It's like, oh, how we used to do the blah blah blah, and it was cardboard and feathers and so and then tears and so I think that you can I also have Scottish immigrant parents, so we're the cheapest people on the planet. So I can
You repurpose everything.
I can make stuff out of stuff.
Well, lastly, who are some of your production design heroes? Like Michael, you mentioned Bo Welch earlier. So is that one for you? Someone else?
I had the great privilege of working with Ken Adam early in my career when it was actually the first studio project that I worked on in the Union, and I was just a set designer. And it was the remake of The Out of Towners, so it wasn't any Doctor Strangelove but it was the man was brilliant. He was a character. I had actually been reading a bio about him the night before I was doing a project, and then he was just talking about how designing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was his Waterloo, and then I heard his distinctive voice walking up as I'm trying to direct pine trees and recreate a section of Central Park, and just heard him say, "This may very well be your Waterloo." And he was just great.
That's awesome.
Not to steal yours, but Welch is amazing, and actually a good director as well.
Yep.
Cat
And
in
also
the-
the
cat in the
funniest
hat.
man I've ever met in my life. Just to throw that up there.
So you have two Bo Welches.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was great speaking with all of you, and thank you everyone for coming out. Please join us if you can on Thursday for our costume designers panel.